turned toward the back. "Mr. Harper, would you speak?" All heads turned. Noah stood slowly. He didn't walk fast. He didn't walk proud. He walked as if every step mattered, because it did. When he reached the podium, he looked out at the crowd for a long moment. "I came to that graduation for one reason, to see my son become a man. I didn't come for recognition. I didn't wear medals. I didn't even expect a seat. I just wanted to be present." He paused, letting the words hang. "But presence," he continued, "isn't always welcome when it doesn't fit someone else's image. I wasn't turned away because I was rude or disruptive. I was turned away because I didn't look the part. That's the part we have to talk about." Murmurs moved through the room. Noah kept going. "This isn't just about me. It's about every parent, every veteran, every quiet person in the back who's been told they're not enough. You don't have to salute me, but you should at least see me." Silence followed, a kind that demanded reflection. When he stepped down, no one clapped. Not out of disrespect, but out of reverence. And when he returned to his seat, Lucas reached over and took his hand, the same way he had days ago. This time, Noah squeezed back. After the forum, the room emptied slowly. A few people approached Noah to shake his hand. Some didn't say anything. They just made eye contact, nodded, and walked on. Wallace remained seated for a long while after everyone had left, staring at the microphone in front of him like it had betrayed him. In that moment, he wasn't a principal, or a candidate, or a man trying to maintain image. He was just someone who had underestimated the weight of another man's silence, and lost. Outside the school, dusk had settled over the parking lot. Lucas and Noah walked to their truck without a word, but as they climbed in, Noah finally said, "Maybe some things are worth standing up for after all." Lucas smiled faintly, buckled in, and replied, "Yeah, and maybe some people were never meant to stay in the back row." By the following Monday, the ripples from the forum had reached farther than anyone at Jefferson High had anticipated. A retired brigadier general wrote an op-ed titled, "The Front Row is Earned, Not Assigned," which was published in 3 major newspapers across the state. The photographs of Noah Harper had been turned into murals at 2 veterans centers, and for the first time in over a decade, the Harper name was being mentioned without a shadow trailing behind it. Noah, meanwhile, kept his routine unchanged. He rose at dawn, took his morning walk, trimmed the hedges along the sidewalk, and answered only the phone calls that began with a name he recognized. But the world around him was shifting. Neighbors waved more, strangers saluted. Even Wallace, now facing both political and public relations heat, had scheduled a closed-door meeting with the school board to discuss retirement timing. Lucas spent his afternoons helping an old teacher digitize the school's yearbooks, but he carried something heavier than scanned pages. Guilt. Not shame about what had happened, but a growing awareness of everything he didn't know about his father. It bothered him more than he admitted. One afternoon, while sorting through senior quotes and outdated class photos, he found an article from 1998. It showed a much younger Noah Harper receiving a medal at a Marine Corps base overseas. The article said nothing dramatic, no tales of combat, just a quiet acknowledgement of distinguished service. A single quote beneath the photo read, "The only battle I ever wanted to win was the one that made it home." Lucas brought it home and placed it on the kitchen table. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he asked. Noah glanced at the clipping, then back at his son. "Because that wasn't the story I wanted you to inherit." "You think I can't handle knowing what you went through?" Noah shook his head. "No, I think you deserve to become who you are, without having to carry who I was." Lucas sat down slowly, letting the truth sink in. "But I carry it anyway, Dad. Every time someone looks at me and says I remind them of you. Every time someone thanks me like I was the one who served. I carry it, whether I know it or not." For once, Noah didn't argue. Instead, he opened the drawer near the dining table and pulled out a thin file. Inside were 4 neatly folded letters, a few photographs, and 1 bronze star still in its original case. "I kept this away for a reason," he said, "but maybe it's time you understood it, not to become it, not to glorify it, but to honor it properly." Lucas spent the evening reading every word. They were letters to Evelyn, written during his deployments. Some were raw, filled with longing and fear. Others were quiet, small glimpses of sunsets in foreign deserts and coffee brewed in tin mugs. In them, he saw the man his father had been, and the man he still was. That night, Lucas placed a photo of Noah from the article in a new frame and set it beside Evelyn's on the mantel. He didn't ask permission, he just did it. Later that week, the school held a small ceremony to rename its outdoor amphitheater. What was once called Jefferson Commons would now be known as Harper Field. Wallace was not present. His resignation had been quietly accepted 2 days earlier, replaced temporarily by an assistant principal more connected to the student body and less to campaign donors. Charlotte West stood at the podium, presenting the dedication with a poise well beyond her years. Sometimes the stories that shape us the most aren't in textbooks or history lessons. Sometimes they're in the row behind us, and sometimes we're lucky enough to be reminded, visibly, what quiet courage looks like. The plaque was simple, bronze, understated. It read, Harper Field, dedicated to all who serve silently, love deeply, and rise with dignity. As the ceremony ended and applause echoed across the bleachers, Noah stood at the edge of the field. He didn't cry, he didn't smile broadly, but there was something in his stance, more upright than before, more at ease, that said everything. He looked up to the sky and whispered something only he could hear. Then he turned to Lucas, nodded once, and began walking toward the exit as the sun dipped behind the trees. Because some men don't need to lead loudly. They only need to be seen once to never be forgotten. On their way back to the truck, a man from the maintenance crew jogged after them. "Mr. Harper," he said, catching his breath. "My dad served. He never talked about it. But what you did, you made me feel like I understand him a little more. Just wanted to say that." Noah simply placed a hand on the man's shoulder and nodded. No speech, no ceremony, just presence. Later that night, Lucas found a folded note on his pillow. It was in his father's handwriting. It read, "You asked once why I kept quiet. The truth is, I didn't want my silence to define you, but now I see it helped shape you. That's more than I could have hoped for." Lucas held the note in both hands and let the stillness settle around him like a blanket. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, carrying with it the remnants of a name that no longer needed to be spoken aloud to be remembered. Weeks passed, but the echoes of that day did not fade. Harper Field became more than just a renamed corner of campus. It became a landmark of quiet reverence. Students would pass by it not with selfies or swagger, but with small nods and occasional silence. Veterans started visiting on weekends. Teachers began incorporating Noah's story into their lesson plans, not as a lecture, but as a conversation about identity, honor, and perspective. Noah never once went back to the field, not because he avoided it, but because he didn't need to. His presence had already been planted there like a flag, unseen but deeply felt. Instead, he focused on his garden, finally finishing the raised beds Evelyn had always wanted built. Tomatoes grew alongside rosemary, peppers climbed up a trellis Lucas had helped him install, and in between pulling weeds, Noah would sometimes pause, look up, and smile at nothing in particular. One afternoon, Lucas came home with an envelope in his hand. "This came for you," he said, placing it gently on the table. Noah opened it slowly. Inside was a formal letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs informing him he had been nominated by an anonymous group of service members for a National Recognition Award for Lifetime Integrity and Service. He read it twice, silently, then folded it up and tucked it back inside. "You going to accept it?" Lucas asked, already knowing the answer. Noah gave a half shrug. "Maybe, but only if they promise not to talk about medals." Lucas laughed, and the sound of it filled the room like warmth from a long-forgotten heater. "Too late for that, I think." On the evening of the award ceremony, Noah stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. He didn't wear his uniform. Instead, he chose a simple dark suit with a small Marine Corps pin on the lapel. As he adjusted his tie, he caught sight of Evelyn's photo in the corner. He gave it a nod. "I'll keep it short," he murmured. "I promise." The event was held at a modest veterans hall just outside the city. Nothing flashy, no cameras, just people who had worn the uniform and those who had waited at home. Charlotte West was invited as a guest speaker and stood at the podium in a navy blue dress, her voice steady. "We often forget that courage isn't always loud," she said. "Sometimes it shows up in worn boots, in back rows, in the men who carry their service not on their sleeves but in their silence. Tonight, we honor a man who reminded us that strength doesn't always arrive in medals. It arrives in moments." When Noah stepped up to the stage, the room rose with him. No clapping, no whistles, just silence, the kind that meant respect, the kind he understood best. He didn't use notes. He didn't speak long. "I didn't come here tonight for applause," he began. "I came because someone thought I did something worth remembering. But the truth is, the only thing I've ever wanted to be remembered for is showing up when it mattered, and for teaching my son to do the same." He paused, looking out at the crowd. "If you remember me, let it be for that, for presence, for being where you're needed, even if no one saves you a seat." A single nod and he stepped down. That was it. That was all. Later that night, as he and Lucas walked to the car under a sky spilling with stars, Lucas asked, "Do you regret anything?" Noah thought about it, then shook his head. "No, because everything I held back I gave to you, and you didn't waste it." Lucas looked away, throat tight, then back again. "Thanks for not staying in the back row, Dad," Noah smiled, the edges of his eyes crinkling like old parchment. "I never really left it. I just stood up once. Turns out, that was enough. The next morning, the local paper ran a headline above the fold. Marine who was pushed to the back now leads the front. But Noah didn't read it. He was in the garden again, barefoot, watering the rosemary. Somewhere, a flag rustled gently in the wind. Because some legacies aren't written in ink. They're planted in soil, nurtured in silence, and passed on in the way we walk, not to be noticed, but to be remembered. Later that week, Lucas brought home a printed copy of Charlotte's full article, which had been reprinted in a national veterans publication. "You're in a magazine now," he said, setting it beside the morning coffee. Noah flipped through the pages slowly, scanning the bold quotes, the elegant phrasing. At the bottom of the final column, in small italicized print, was a single line that made him stop. "Dedicated to those who taught us that standing still can still mean standing strong." Noah ran a finger across the sentence, then closed the magazine. He didn't need to read more. As summer set in and the days grew longer, people stopped by the house more often. Sometimes just to say hello, sometimes to leave small gifts. Homemade jam, folded flags, thank you letters from high school civics classes. Lucas installed a bench on the front porch, the kind Evelyn always said they needed. Noah sat there often, watching the world move and remembering when he was part of its momentum. And sometimes, just sometimes, he allowed himself to believe that being remembered, not for what he'd done, but for how he had done it, might just be enough. Because when the world forgets how to recognize quiet strength, it risks losing the very thing that holds it together. Noah Harper never shouted. He never demanded. He never led a parade. He just showed up. He just stood when it mattered. And in doing so, he reminded everyone who watched that dignity is not something assigned, it's something earned, in silence, and confirmed in the eyes of those who see it clearly at last.